You are standing the midwatch on a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Strait of Hormuz. It is the kind of darkness sailors remember for the rest of their lives. Not because it is quiet, because it is too quiet. The sea around you looks flat and black, like spilled oil under a moonless sky. Off the port side, a line of commercial tankers moves through the traffic separation scheme, each one carrying more than cargo. They carry fuel, insurance rates, nervous governments, and the kind of global consequences nobody on deck gets paid enough to think about. You are 22 years old. 3 years ago, your biggest problem was making rent and showing up on time. Now, you are holding a pair of binoculars on one of the most dangerous waterways on Earth. And somewhere beyond the horizon sits Iran.
People back home hear ceasefire and imagine peace. Out here, ceasefire just means both sides are tired enough to stop talking with missiles for a while. The ship beneath your boots hums with restrained violence. Below deck, the Combat Information Center glows blue and green. Consoles wait. Radios wait. Weapons wait. Men and women trained to stay calm wait. And waiting, you are learning, is its own kind of combat. You hear the soft hiss of the net circuit in your earpiece. The watch is routine. Surface picture normal. Civilian traffic steady. Air picture clear. But nobody on this ship believes routine anymore. Not after the strikes. Not after Operation Epic Fury. Not after the blockade orders. Not after weeks of hearing that the strait was open again, while every sailor out here kept their body armor one arm's reach away. The horizon gives you nothing. That is what makes it worse.
At 0217, the voice comes over the internal circuit. Bridge, CIC. Flash traffic from higher headquarters. Stand by to copy. Even before the words finish, something changes on the ship. You feel it the way animals feel pressure before a storm. The officer of the deck straightens. The helmsman shifts. Someone in CIC stops joking. Then the update comes. Ceasefire stability degraded. Increased probability of hostile escalation. Maintain heightened readiness. Monitor for asymmetric maritime activity. Nobody says the ceasefire is over. The Navy rarely gives you the dramatic line you want. Instead, it gives you phrases like degraded, heightened, asymmetric. Words that sound sterile until you realize each one is code for the same truth. Things are getting worse.
You glance toward the convoy lane again. The merchant ships are still moving, unaware, or pretending to be. Somewhere in those hulls are civilian crews following guidance they were probably emailed hours ago. Maintain distance, answer coalition calls, watch for interference, report suspicious contacts. But you are not a merchant sailor. You are standing on a warship with an Aegis system, close-in weapons, and more firepower than most countries could dream of. And still, you don't feel powerful. You feel exposed. Because this kind of war does not always announce itself with a missile plume. Sometimes it starts with a GPS lie, a jammed signal, a call on VHF telling a tanker to change course, a radar return that should not be there, a speedboat without navigation lights moving too fast in the wrong direction. That is the real terror of the Gulf. Not that violence is constant, that it can begin from anything.
You were taught the geography in training, but geography feels different when you're inside it. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is tight enough to make global energy markets nervous, and wide enough to bury a ship if someone makes a mistake. To one side is Iran, to the other, Oman. Between them, a funnel through which a huge share of the world's oil still moves. People in Washington talk about freedom of navigation. People on ships talk about angles, speed, radar clutter, and what happens if fast attack craft decide tonight is the night. Your chief once told you something during your first transit. Kid, the Gulf doesn't need to kill you with a battle. It can kill you with confusion. Tonight, you finally understand what he meant.
In CIC, the surface picture is getting thicker. More commercial tracks, more fishing traffic, more noise. The kind of environment where a patrol boat can hide behind a tanker until the last minute. The kind of environment where a drone can appear, vanish, and make everyone question whether they really saw it. Then, the navigator reports intermittent position instability. Not a full failure, just enough drift to be irritating. Just enough to remind everyone that MARAD warned about GNSS interference, spoofing, and jamming in exactly these waters. The bridge gets quieter. Old-school navigation checks begin. Radar ranges, visual bearings, cross-checks. The technology is still working. Mostly. That word, mostly, does more damage to your nerves than a full outage would. Because a broken system is obvious. A lying system can get you killed.
At 0249, CIC reports an airborne contact. Small, low, intermittent. Could be a drone. Could be clutter. Could be nothing. Your brain wants it to be nothing so badly it almost hurts. You know how this works by now. Everyone wants one more innocent explanation before they move to the worst one. It's weather. It's a bird. It's sensor noise. It's a civilian quadcopter. It's nothing. But the track reappears, then disappears, then reappears closer. The tactical action officer orders closer monitoring. Electronic support measures begin hunting for an emission. The air warfare coordinator starts speaking in that clipped, emotionless voice that sounds calm right until you realize calm is what people sound like when they've trained for the worst moment of your life.
On deck, nobody runs. That is another thing the movies get wrong. In real danger, professionals move faster by becoming quieter. No wasted words, no dramatic yelling, just checklists. You tighten your grip on the lifeline and keep scanning the dark water. The radios are more active now. A coalition ship is querying a merchant vessel. Another watch section is reporting unusual surface movement farther north. No confirmed hostiles. Not yet. But that phrase is becoming the problem. Everything in this region lives in the space between not yet and too late. At 0311, the real fear arrives. Not in the air, on the water. 3 fast-moving surface contacts break from the clutter near a larger civilian vessel and begin maneuvering in a way your training immediately recognizes as wrong. They're too coordinated, too fast, too direct. IRGC Navy small boats have made themselves famous for exactly this kind of ambiguity. Push close, test reactions, exploit hesitation, disappear if challenged, escalate if they think the timing is right. You don't know if these are theirs. You only know they're acting like people who want to be noticed and not identified. The bridge issues a security broadcast. CIC tracks the contacts continuously. The 50 cals are manned. Lookouts double report. The entire ship seems to lean forward.
The merchant tanker near them keeps moving, probably under instructions not to do anything sudden unless explicitly ordered. Somewhere aboard that civilian ship, maybe a Filipino seaman or an Indian officer, is staring at the same black water you are, wondering if his family back home is asleep, while his ship drifts into someone else's war. The commanding officer arrives on the bridge. That is when your stomach drops. When the captain shows up in the middle of the night and nobody called away general quarters, it means you are still in the narrow corridor where disaster can be prevented or triggered. The contacts continue closing. Not directly on you. On the traffic lane. On the fragile idea that the ceasefire still means something. This is the part no civilian ever sees. Not the weapons, the waiting before them. Every sailor on your ship knows you are armed. What they don't know is how much discipline it takes not to use that power too early. You hear snippets of the decision chain. Range, course and speed, any declarations, any weapons observed, any comms response. The tactical picture grows more crowded by the second. A possible drone track, 3 fast boats, a civilian tanker inside the lane, another coalition vessel repositioning, reports of interference still flickering in and out. And above all of it, command guidance. Maintain restraint. Protect U.S. vessels. Protect commercial traffic. Do not be the first unnecessary shot. It sounds simple from far away. Out here, it feels impossible. Because everybody knows the same truth. If a missile launches, nobody will care afterward who wanted restraint. They will care who survived. You start rehearsing outcomes in your head, even though nobody asked you to. If the boats close inside warning distance, what next? If one of them paints the ship? If a drone dives? If the tanker turns? If the order comes? You are learning how war actually begins. Not as a clean line, as a stack of almosts. Almost a threat. Almost a misread. Almost a collision. Almost a shot. Then one of those almosts stops being almost.
At 3:40 a.m., VHF traffic from a commercial tanker comes in fragmented and nervous. They report being hailed, ordered to alter course, unclear source, poor signal quality. Iranian forces operating over the horizon have used that kind of tactic before. Everyone on the bridge knows it. The merchant master sounds like a man trying very hard not to panic while surrounded by people who absolutely are. The destroyer begins maneuvering for a better position. Not aggressive, protective. A visible reminder. You are not alone. The small boats react immediately. They scatter just enough to avoid looking like an attack formation. Then they regroup, just enough to remind everyone they can. It is maddening. You can feel the intent without being able to prove it. This is not about sinking a ship tonight. It is about pressure. Nerve. Testing whether the Americans will blink. Testing whether a ceasefire can be hollowed out without being formally broken. Then CIC reports another short airborne track. Low. Fast. Gone. Nobody breathes normally after that. Maybe it was a drone. Maybe it was environmental clutter. Maybe it was exactly the kind of ghost contact meant to make your systems and your people burn through their confidence. The captain gives new instructions. Defensive posture remains. Escalation of force ladder reviewed. All stations report ready. No one says the next part aloud. If this keeps moving in the wrong direction, the next voice in this story will belong to a weapon.
You always imagine, before moments like this, that you will feel brave. You don't. You feel specific. Your world narrows to the sound of the wind, the strain in your jaw, the shape of silhouettes in the dark, and the unbearable awareness that history does not care whether you feel ready for it. One of the small boats turns sharply. For 3 seconds, every pair of eyes on the bridge thinks the same thing. This is it. But it holds. It veers. It keeps distance. A warning shot is considered and rejected. The coalition picture updates. The tanker continues. The drone track never resolves. The contacts begin to drift back into the darkness they came from.
Not defeated, not harmless, just finished with tonight's lesson. And that is almost worse. Because a battle would at least give you an ending. This gives you a message. They can touch the edges of the fire whenever they want. The bridge slowly exhales, but nobody relaxes. The watch officers begin the language that will go into logs and summaries and briefings for people thousands of miles away. Intermittent interference, unsafe approach patterns, commercial hailing incident, possible UAS activity. No shots fired. No shots fired. You hear that and almost laugh. Because no shots fired sounds peaceful to people who were not here. To you, it sounds like survival by inches.
By first light, the sea looks innocent again. That is the cruelty of morning in a crisis zone. Sunrise makes everything look forgivable. The tankers are still moving. Your ship is still intact. The small boats are gone. The sky is clear enough that last night starts trying to feel unreal. But your body knows better. Your shoulders hurt from tension. Your throat is dry. Your thoughts are racing ahead of the official narrative already being built. Politicians will talk. Analysts will classify. News anchors will ask whether the ceasefire is collapsing, whether deterrence still works, whether the Gulf is heading toward war. All of that happens later. You are still here now. Still looking at the water. Still replaying every contact. Still wondering how many of them were tests and how many were opportunities somebody chose not to take. Your relief is real, but it is not clean. Because deep down, you now understand something the public almost never sees. War does not always begin with the first explosion. Sometimes it begins the moment every person in uniform realizes that the old rules no longer feel solid.
Sometimes it begins with navigation signals drifting, with anonymous voices on a marine radio, with fast boats cutting too close, with a captain choosing restraint because one burst of gunfire could ignite half the region. And sometimes it begins with a young sailor looking at the sunrise and realizing peace is no longer a condition. It is a countdown.
By breakfast, your ship has already transmitted the report. A fragile ceasefire, an active threat environment, commercial traffic under pressure, interference still present, hostile intent unproven, but unmistakably rehearsed. No missiles launched, no ships sunk, no bodies in the water. And yet everyone on board knows the same truth. The night was not quiet. It was a rehearsal for the next transit, the next warning, the next captain, the next ship that might not get the same ending. You thought wars started with fire. Out here, you learn they can start with hesitation, with a radar contact, with a false signal, with a speedboat in the dark. And when the Strait of Hormuz goes quiet, that is not when sailors feel safe. That is when they listen hardest.
What do you do when the ceasefire still exists on paper, but every screen, every radio, and every horizon tells you it's already dying? In the Strait of Hormuz, peace doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes contact by contact. And one night, when the water is black enough and the signals are weak enough, you realize the war didn't begin with the first shot. It began when everyone started waiting for it.